If you own silver, gold, or even any U.S. dollar assets, what's unfolding right now could either multiply your wealth by 10x or leave you completely blindsided by the biggest financial shift in 50 years. While most people are distracted by headlines about silver crashes, the world's most powerful financial institutions have been quietly preparing for a global currency reset. And I'm not talking about theories or rumors. I'm talking about hard evidence from central banks, the very institutions that control the global financial system. The U.S. dollar's 80-year reign as the world's reserve currency is coming to an end, and trillions of dollars in American wealth are hanging in the balance. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why gold is at an all-time high, why silver is being suppressed, and how you can protect yourself before the reset accelerates. But here's the twist. While everyone else is just catching on, the real question is, are you ready for what's coming next? This isn't some isolated incident. This is part of a much larger global trend. Central banks are quietly shifting massive amounts of wealth out of U.S. dollars and into gold. Why? Because the dollar, as the world's dominant reserve currency, is losing its grip. But it's not just about gold. The entire system is being restructured behind the scenes. Countries like Russia, China, and India are already dumping dollars, moving their reserves into hard assets, and preparing for a new global currency order. And it's all happening right now, under the radar. Why should you care? Because the next phase of this monetary reset is already unfolding, and it's about to send shockwaves through the global economy. What does this mean for the average person? What happens when the world's reserve currency loses its power? Gold prices have surged for 6 straight months. Sounds like great news, right? But there's a catch. This isn't a random market rally. This is orchestrated by the world's central banks. China, Russia, India, these nations are hoarding gold at record levels. Poland, Turkey, and Hungary are all adding to their reserves. In fact, central banks are buying over 1,000 tons of gold every year, the most they've bought since 1967. That's not a coincidence. The last time this kind of gold rush happened, the global monetary system collapsed. The writing is on the wall. Central banks aren't just speculating. They're preparing for a world where the U.S. dollar isn't the reserve currency anymore. They're stocking up on gold because they know a storm is coming. And here's the part that changes everything. This massive shift is happening, and it's happening fast. Are you positioned to benefit, or are you still sitting on the sidelines? But it's not just gold. Let's talk about silver. Silver's price has been hit hard recently, but there's something even more disturbing going on behind the scenes. The silver market just crashed. Again. Silver hit nearly $84 an ounce, then suddenly dropped 10% in a single day. The reason? The CME, the exchange that controls the silver market, raised margin requirements, forcing smaller investors to liquidate their positions. This is the same manipulation playbook we saw in the 1980s and again in 2011. But here's the question. Why is silver being suppressed while gold is allowed to soar? The answer is simple. Gold benefits the central banks and institutions who hold it. Silver, on the other hand, is the people's currency. It's volatile, it's explosive, and when it skyrockets, it sends a signal to the masses that something is wrong with the system. That's why they're keeping it down. But here's the twist. While they're suppressing silver's price, physical silver is flying off the shelves. In Asia, they're paying $35 over the paper price to get their hands on the real thing. This tells you everything you need to know about the disconnect between the paper market and reality. Now, let's take it a step further. The evidence is piling up. While the U.S. is telling you that the dollar is strong and everything's stable, the actions tell a completely different story. The share of global reserves held in U.S. dollars has dropped from 65% in 2008 to 58% in 2024. That's a massive shift. Trillions of dollars leaving the system. Countries are increasingly moving their gold reserves out of U.S. and European vaults and bringing them home. Germany, Turkey, and Poland have all repatriated hundreds of tons of gold. And yet, the U.S. refuses to let Venezuela access its own gold reserves, which tells you everything about who really controls the system. So what happens when countries no longer need to hold U.S. dollars? When they start trading directly in local currencies, bypassing the dollar altogether, the petrodollar system, which has propped up the U.S. dollar's dominance since the 1970s, is beginning to crumble. China and Russia are already trading oil in their own currencies. India's joining in, and even Saudi Arabia is talking about accepting yuan instead of dollars for oil. The writing's on the wall. The U.S. dollar is losing its grip, and this is the early stage of the global currency reset. Now, things are escalating fast. Countries are not just diversifying away from the dollar, they're building new financial systems to bypass it completely. China and Russia are already using their own currencies for major trades. The BRICS nations are working on their own payment network to replace SWIFT, the system that controls international bank transfers. And it's already in use for billions of dollars worth of transactions. These are not just plans, they're operational. Meanwhile, the U.S. is sitting back, delaying its own implementation of Basel III banking regulations until 2028. Why? Because implementing Basel III now would expose the entire paper gold market. The U.S. is still holding on to the idea that its dollar and debt are untouchable, but the rest of the world is already moving on. As they're stockpiling gold, setting up alternative payment systems, and finding ways to bypass the dollar, the U.S. is lagging behind. This is what happens when a global currency system begins to unravel. The pressure is building, and if this continues, the financial system as we know it will look completely different in just a few years. Now let's bring this back to you. If this feels familiar, it's because it's happening to regular people right now. People just like you. You see, when the dollar weakens, the cost of living goes up fast. Inflation eats away at your savings, and your pension or retirement funds tied to the dollar lose value. The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to keep up. You're probably feeling the pressure already. The silver and gold markets are a reflection of this broader shift. Prices are volatile, but demand is skyrocketing. And while the rich and powerful are insulating themselves with hard assets like gold, most of us are left holding the bag. If you're not paying attention to the changes happening right now, you could be left behind. What happens when the financial reset accelerates and you haven't prepared? The people who are ready will be in a position to benefit. The rest, they might be caught off guard when everything changes, and that's not something you want to be a part of. But let's take a step back. It's easy to get caught up in the fear, but here's the deeper truth. There's a system at play that's enabling all of this. The central banks are not acting randomly. They have leverage, incentives, and a deep understanding of what's coming. The entire global financial system is built on trust. And right now, that trust is beginning to erode. The U.S. dollar's power has been propped up by the petrodollar system for decades. But with countries now bypassing the dollar and creating alternatives, the system is starting to show cracks. The real issue is that this system benefits the elites, the institutions, and the powerful. They're the ones who are going to come out on top. They hold the gold, they hold the reserves, but you don't have to be at their mercy. The question is, how can you leverage the system to your advantage before the reset takes full effect? It's about understanding the mechanisms at play, seeing the bigger picture, and positioning yourself while others are still asleep at the wheel. Now let's talk about the future. There are two possible paths ahead, and neither one is certain. On one hand, we could see a rapid acceleration of this reset. More countries could start ditching the dollar, and the BRICS nations' gold-backed currency could launch, shaking up global trade. This would push gold and silver even higher, creating massive wealth for those who are already positioned. But on the other hand, there's a chance that the U.S. might try to maintain control for a little longer, pushing through more financial manipulations, maybe even a new form of currency control. But make no mistake, this won't last forever. The global system is in flux, and it's unclear which way it will break. What's certain is that the momentum is building, and every move counts. Whether you're watching from the sidelines or actively preparing, the next few years will define who thrives and who gets left behind. The real question is, what's your move going to be? So here's the big takeaway. The global financial reset is happening. It's not a prediction. It's a process that's already in motion. The world is moving away from the U.S. dollar and towards a new multi-currency system. Gold is being reclassified as a Tier 1 asset, and silver is in the middle of a volatile storm. But as these changes unfold, one thing is clear. Those who understand the game will come out ahead. If you're still holding dollar-denominated assets, the window is closing fast. But the good news? It's not too late to act. Position yourself in hard assets, stay informed, and prepare for the wealth transfer that's about to happen. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve, make sure you're subscribed. I'll be keeping you updated as this reset unfolds. Don't wait until it's too late. The time to act is now.